Jack Monroe used to wake up to the sound of waves crashing gently outside his Malibu beach house. Not an alarm clock, not a dog barking, just the ocean whispering to him that he'd made it. He was 38, dressed in custom-tailored suits, and regularly appeared on the covers of tech magazines with headlines like The Silicon Kingmaker and The Future of Innovation. Jack wasn't just rich, he was legendary. His mornings started with green smoothies and investor calls, followed by lunch meetings at Nobu and late-night flights to New York, Tokyo, or Dubai. He wasn't just building companies. He was shaping industries. And behind that charming smile and flawless Instagram, Jack genuinely believed he was untouchable. He had built and sold 3 startups before he was 35. His latest venture, Blue Core AI, was expected to revolutionize predictive analytics, and investors couldn't throw money at him fast enough. At his peak, Jack's net worth was estimated at $27 million. He had 5 cars, a penthouse in L.A., a vacation villa in Tuscany, and even a private chef named Andre who used to work for the Obamas. But as they say, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And Jack, he didn't just fall. He plunged. It started with a meeting. A new partnership pitch came from an international VC firm that promised to take Blue Core AI global. They wanted rapid expansion into Asian markets, and Jack, always hungry for the next big move, said yes. Against his advisor's warnings, Jack took out a massive bridge loan, nearly $8 million, to scale the operation. New hires, new tech, international offices, marketing deals, and new servers, all paid for on credit, backed by the promise of future billions. But within 3 months, the cracks began to show. The VC firm, gone, vanished into legal battles and fraud accusations. The product, not ready for scale. Customers were dropping left and right. And the market took a sudden downturn. Investors panicked. Stock prices fell. One by one, the calls Jack used to get every morning turned into silence. Then emails. Then lawsuits. Then threats. By the end of the year, Blue Core AI collapsed. Jack was left holding the bag, personally liable for debts he guaranteed. He tried to pivot, tried to launch something new. But this time, no one picked up the phone. Those who once praised him as a genius now whispered about his recklessness and ego. Investors who had toasted champagne in his honor were now taking legal action to recover their losses. His assets were frozen, his accounts drained. The Malibu house? Foreclosed. The cars? Repossessed. Jack was evicted from his penthouse in the middle of the night. He stuffed whatever clothes he could into 2 duffel bags and left through the back stairwell, not wanting the neighbors or paparazzi to see him. He didn't go to a hotel. He couldn't afford one. He slept in his Tesla, the one asset not yet claimed. For weeks, in the silence of that car, Jack had no more meetings, no more deadlines, no more media interviews. All it was the sound of cars passing by and his own thoughts, swirling with shame, regret, and disbelief. He kept asking himself, how the hell did I let this happen? But he already knew the answer. Greed, ego, blind faith, and momentum. He thought he was invincible, that the world would always bend to his will, that as long as he had charisma and a big idea, everything would work out. He'd stop listening to advisors, to friends, to his gut. One evening, as he sat in a gas station parking lot eating instant noodles, a man knocked on his window, a guy Jack vaguely recognized from some networking event 2 years back. The man looked shocked. Jack Monroe? Is that you? Jack nodded, barely able to make eye contact. The man didn't laugh or judge. Instead, he handed Jack a business card and said, if you ever need a place to crash, I've got a spare room. Just don't stay out here, man. It's not worth it. That moment, that simple gesture of kindness from someone Jack barely remembered, broke something inside him. For the first time in years, he cried, not out of self-pity, not because he lost his fortune, but because he realized he had lost himself long before the money disappeared. The truth is, Jack's story isn't just about losing wealth. It's about what happens when we build our identity around success. When every bit of your self-worth is tied to your LinkedIn profile, your net worth, or your social media following, what happens when it all crashes? For Jack Monroe, The fall was brutal, but it was only the beginning of a much deeper transformation. A transformation that wouldn't be fueled by IPOs or press releases, but by humility, connection, and rediscovery. But that's a story for another day. After Jack Monroe lost his company, his house, and nearly everything he thought defined him, he still held on to one belief, that at least his people would still be there, his inner circle, his friends, his ride-or-die crew. These were the same folks who toasted with him in Vegas, who posted #legend under his Instagram yacht photos, and who once told him he was the most inspiring person they'd ever met. So when the dust of blue Corée eyes collapse finally settled, and Jack found himself sleeping in the back seat of a car parked near Venice Beach, he started reaching out, not for money, not for investment, just for someone to talk to. The first text he sent was to Darren, his former co-founder and longtime friend. Jack wrote, "Hey man, rough week. Mind if we grab a coffee soon?" No reply, not even the seen checkmark. He waited. A day, then two. By the fifth day, Jack tried calling, straight to voicemail. Next, he messaged Sasha, a fashion PR exec who used to join him at charity galas and birthday yacht parties. "Could use a friend right now," he wrote. "Things are kinda dark." She replied 12 hours later, "Hey Jack, OMG I'm out of town all month. Hope you're okay though, Red Heart." Then silence. And just like that, it began to sink in. When the money left, so did the people. Jack spent the next few weeks testing his theory. He scrolled through old party photos, remembering everyone by name. He sent a dozen more messages. People he once called family, people who called him brother. He got ghosted, left on read, or worse, pitted. One guy said, "Tough man, but we all have to deal with our own mess, you know?" Another offered to Venmo him $20 with the caption, "Hope this helps, bro." $20. For a man they used to cheer as a visionary. Jack wasn't angry. Not at first. He was just confused. These people had been there for his birthday parties, his launch events, his milestone moments. They had posted quotes about loyalty and friendship on their stories, had hugged him at airport lounges, had clinked glasses with him over age whiskey and whispered, "We'll conquer the world together." But now it felt like Jack didn't exist. It wasn't the loss of money that broke him. It was the realization that most of what he thought was real was never real to begin with. Jack sat alone one night in a 24-hour diner, nursing a black coffee he could barely afford. The server, a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes, gently refilled his cup and asked, "Rough night?" Jack laughed bitterly and said, "More like a rough life." She smiled, not the fake customer service smile, but one of knowing. "Let me tell you a secret," she said. "You only find out who your real friends are when you have nothing left to offer." Those words hit Jack harder than any investor betrayal, harder than the lawsuits or the press headlines. It was a truth, naked, sharp, and inescapable. Over the following days, Jack began paying attention, not to who answered his texts, but to who showed up. The barista at the corner coffee shop, who remembered his name. The old neighbor who let him shower in their guest bathroom. The grocery clerk who slipped an extra sandwich into his bag when he thought Jack wasn't looking. These weren't his party friends. They never called him a genius. They didn't follow him on LinkedIn, but they were there. And in their small, quiet act of kindness, Jack found something deeper than all the champagne toasts and luxury brunches combined. Human decency, without agenda, without ego, without hashtags. One cold evening, Jack finally called his mom. They hadn't spoken much during his glory days. Partly because Jack was always too busy, and partly because he felt like she didn't understand his world. But now, sitting alone in a parking lot outside a rundown motel, he realized maybe he was the one who didn't understand. She picked up after 2 rings. "Jack?" Her voice cracked. He didn't even say hello, just broke down. He cried like he hadn't cried in years. Not because he lost his millions, but because he finally felt something real again. His mom didn't scold him. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just listened and said, "Come home, honey. Just come home." Jack took a bus the next day, carrying 2 bags and a shattered ego. When he walked into the small suburban house he grew up in, he was met not with judgment, but with warmth. The smell of fresh cookies, a clean towel, a hug that lasted longer than any applause he ever got on stage. That night, Jack lay on the couch in his childhood living room, wrapped in a quilt his grandmother had made, and thought, all this time, I thought I was rich, but I was starving. We live in a world obsessed with optics, with status, likes, and success stories. But what happens when the lights fade? Who still calls when you're broke, lost, and scared? For Jack Monroe, the answer was brutal but beautiful. The people who stayed were the ones who never cared about the spotlight in the first place. It was a Tuesday morning. The sun had barely broken through the clouds, and Jack Monroe was sitting on the front porch of his childhood home, holding a chipped mug of instant coffee. It had been 3 months since he lost everything. 3 months since his phone stopped buzzing with investor calls. 3 months since he realized no one cared about Jack Monroe, the brand, when Jack Monroe, the man, had nothing left to offer. But something was different that morning. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt still. He watched a bird land on the fence, listened to the rustle of leaves, smelled the neighbor's laundry detergent as it drifted in the breeze. And without warning, he smiled. Not the public relations smile he used to flash at galas, but a real one, quiet, honest, because for once, Jack wasn't chasing anything. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just there, alive, back when Jack was on top of the world, jet-setting across time zones, running million-dollar launches, and dining with celebrities. He thought this kind of life was boring, ordinary, small, meaningless. But now, as he walked barefoot across his mom's backyard, feeling the dew on the grass, hearing the sound of her humming in the kitchen, he realized something gut-wrenching. He had been rich in all the wrong ways. Over the next few weeks, Jack began rebuilding, not his career, but himself. He took slow morning walks, sometimes with no destination at all. He reconnected with his younger sister, who once stopped talking to him because she couldn't recognize the person he'd become. They laughed again, not over fancy wine, but while playing cards on the living room floor like they used to as kids. He started journaling every night, not about business goals or quarterly earnings, but about what he noticed, what he felt, and what he was grateful for. The first entry was short. Today I woke up without anxiety. That felt new. That felt good. One afternoon, Jack was at the grocery store with his mom when they passed a small chalkboard near the entrance. It read, "Now hiring part-time early mornings. No experience necessary." His mom glanced at him, smiled, and said gently, "You should do it. Not for the money, for the rhythm." He thought she was joking. But 2 days later, Jack Monroe, former millionaire tech CEO, was stocking produce at 6 a.m. in a name tag and apron. And you know what? It felt real. For the first time in a decade, Jack's work had nothing to do with ego. It was simple, physical, grounding. He talked to customers. He arranged bananas. He swept the floor. He left tired but not hollow. There was no pressure to perform, no public expectations, just honest work. And for Jack, that was healing. Jack started seeing beauty in the things he used to overlook. His mom's laugh during old game shows, the smell of tomato soup on the stove, the way kids waved at him from passing school buses. He realized that wealth isn't measured in numbers. It's measured in moments. And he had spent years blind to them. He used to chase experiences that looked good in photos, not ones that felt good in his soul. But now he lived slower, deeper. He called old friends, not the ones from yacht parties, but the ones who once helped him move into his first apartment in college. He volunteered at the local shelter. He found joy in holding doors open and helping strangers load groceries into their cars. No hashtags, no press, just kindness for its own sake. One evening, Jack sat on the back porch watching the sunset. His mom brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. After a long silence, she asked, "Do you ever miss it? The old life?" Jack didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "I missed a version of me who thought he needed it all, but not the life itself." She nodded, and in that quiet moment, Jack knew something sacred had happened. He had finally let go. Let go of the need to prove. Let go of the way of appearances. Let go of the mask. Eventually, people started to notice a change in Jack, not because of a comeback or a new company, but because he was peaceful. He smiled more, listened more. He wasn't rushing through life. He was living it. One day, while helping a little girl pick out oranges at the store, her mother looked at him and said, "You seem really happy, like really at peace." Jack chuckled and replied, "I guess I stopped chasing things I never actually needed." There's a line Jack would later write in his journal, something he would share at local community talk that someone recorded and posted online. Rock bottom wasn't the end. It was a ground I finally stood on to build a life that mattered. That video, raw, unedited, quietly went viral, not because Jack Monroe was famous, but because people saw something in him that was rare. Truth, Jack never returned to the tech world the way people expected, but he did become something else. A mentor to lost founders, a quiet voice in noisy rooms, a reminder that there's more to life than building empires, because the real empire is inside you. It started with a notebook, nothing fancy, just a dollar store spiral-bound pad Jack picked up after work one day. He hadn't planned on buying it. In fact, he walked into the store just to grab batteries for the remote at his mom's house. But something about that blank notebook, it called to him. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the weight of reflection pressing on his heart for weeks. Or maybe Jack was finally ready to build something again, not for the applause, but for the meaning. That night, sitting at the kitchen table long after his mom had gone to bed, Jack opened the notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of the page. Start with purpose. He stared at those words, and for the first time since his empire crumbled, Jack didn't feel afraid of starting over. He felt ready. Over the next few days, Jack filled the pages with ideas. Not business plans, not branding strategies, but questions. What do I really care about? What pain have I lived through that others might be living through right now? What have I learned that could help someone else get back up? And finally, what would I create if no one ever clapped? It hit him one morning while talking with a regular customer at the grocery store. An older gentleman, Tom, had lost his son to suicide after the boy's startup failed. Jack hadn't told Tom who he used to be. He didn't need to. But that day, something in Jack cracked open. He shared his story. Not the headlines. The truth. The burnout. The ego. The breakdown. Tom listened, nodded, cried, then said 6 words that would change everything. You should help people like him. That night, Jack stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m. He thought about Tom's son. He thought about his own rock bottom. And he thought about all the people silently suffering behind filtered lives and curated success. That was the moment Jack decided to stop hiding. He started a blog. No fancy design. No monetization. Just raw, real reflections titled Letters from the Bottom. He wrote about shame, about silence, about the quiet grace of rebuilding. He didn't promote it, just posted the link on a small forum for burned-out entrepreneurs. Then he logged off. 3 days later, his inbox had over 300 messages. Not fan mail, thank you letters. Men and women from all over the world who felt seen, maybe for the first time. People wrote things like, I thought I was the only one. Reading your words saved me this week. Please don't stop. Jack read every single one and cried. From that moment on, Jack knew exactly what he needed to build. A community, a safe place for people rebuilding their lives, not with money, but with meaning. He called it the ground floor, because that's where it all begins. The ground floor wasn't flashy. No venture capital. No big launch. Just Zoom calls on weeknights. Weekly letters. A podcast recorded in his mom's basement with a $50 mic. But it was real. People came, not for advice, but for connection. Jack shared his scars. Others shared theirs. And somewhere between the stories and the silence, healing happened. Jack didn't call himself a coach. Didn't brand himself as a guru. He was just a guy who fell hard and found his way back. and wanted to walk with others doing the same. The podcast grew. The blog spread. Someone wrote a feature on him in a mental health magazine. From Silicon Valley to Soul Valley. Jack laughed when he saw it. But deep down, he was proud. Because for once, the spotlight wasn't blinding. It was warm. 2 years after Jack lost everything, he stood on stage at a small conference for entrepreneurs in recovery. Not a stadium. A community center gym. But every seat was filled. He wore jeans and a worn denim jacket. No slides. No pitch. Just a microphone and his story. He ended with this. I used to build empires for the world to admire. Now, I build spaces for broken people to heal. I thought I lost everything. But the truth is, I was finally free to find what mattered. The crowd stood, not in a roar, but in reverent silence, because they saw a man who wasn't performing. They saw a man who'd been to the edge, and came back not with answers, but with presence. Later that night, Jack walked outside, hands in pockets, head tilted to the sky. He smiled, not because he had rebuilt his career, but because he had rebuilt his heart. He thought about his old office, the glass walls, the corner views, the daily grind. And then he looked at the stars and whispered, This is success. Jack never imagined his greatest legacy wouldn't come from stocks, speeches, or strategy sessions, but from Saturday mornings in a community hall, sitting in a folding chair, listening. 3 years had passed since the fall, since the headlines, tech giant crumbles overnight, since the articles dissecting his mistakes, since the friends disappeared and the phone stopped buzzing. But more importantly, 3 years had passed since Jack finally woke up. He had rebuilt, but not in the way Wall Street defines rebuilding. There was no new startup, no unicorn valuation. Instead, there was a newsletter, a podcast, a growing circle of people gathering under the simple but powerful banner, We Begin Again. That was the name of his movement, not a company, a movement, because Jack realized the real crisis wasn't bankruptcy. It was burnout, loneliness, silence. People were drowning behind curated lives and synthetic smiles, and they needed a safe place to breathe. Every Thursday night, Jack hosted Zoom sessions, just open space for people to talk, cry, confess. They didn't come to him for advice. They came to be heard. Single moms juggling 3 jobs. Men who hadn't cried in 20 years. Former CEOs turned Uber drivers. Teenagers too scared to tell their parents they were failing school and life. Jack didn't preach. He listened, and when he spoke softly, truthfully, as one of them, not above them. Then something beautiful began to happen. One member, a recovering addict named Lacey, started hosting Sunday morning meditation sessions. Another, a former sales manager named Rob, created a job board specifically for people rebuilding their lives. Then came the art club, then the book circle, then the peer mentorship team. Jack didn't organize it all. He simply held the space. And from that space, life grew, not in profits, but in people. Journalists started calling again. But this time, they weren't asking about numbers. They were asking about impact. One article titled him, The Man Who Built the World's Softest Startup. Jack chuckled at that. He didn't mind, because there was truth in it. What he built didn't scale with investors. It scaled with human need. Then came the letters. From veterans struggling with PTSD. From teens battling suicidal thoughts. From women starting over after abusive relationships. And all of them said something similar. I thought I was invisible until your words saw me. Jack began printing those letters. Not for show. For memory. He kept them in a box beside his bed. Every time he doubted whether this quiet work mattered, he opened it and remembered, this is bigger than me. One day, at a small cafe in Portland, a young woman approached him. He was just there for coffee. But she walked up, eyes full, hands trembling slightly. Are you Jack Monroe? He nodded. She started crying. I'm here because of your podcast. I was in a really dark place last year. I was going to end it. But then someone sent me your episode. It's okay to fall. I listened. I cried. And I stayed. I stayed another day. Jack didn't know what to say, so he hugged her, in the middle of that cafe, with strangers watching. Because what else do you do when a human life collides with your voice like that? Eventually, nonprofits began reaching out. Prisons, shelters, counseling centers. They wanted Jack to speak, but not as a motivational guru, as a witness, as someone who knew what it was like to lose everything society told you mattered, and find something sacred in the ruins. Jack didn't charge for most of those talks. He showed up, sat in circles, told the truth, and left quietly. That's what he'd become, a quiet revolutionary. One snowy December morning, Jack visited a juvenile detention center in Montana. He told his story, not to impress, to invite. Afterward, a boy, maybe 15, handed him a crumpled piece of notebook paper. It read, "Thanks for not talking to us like we're broken. No one does that. You made me think maybe I'm not done yet." Jack kept that note in his wallet. He still does, because that one sentence, it's worth more than any IPO. Years passed. Jack never returned to tech. He didn't need to. The ground floor had spread globally, not with a billion-dollar valuation, but with millions of stories, in quiet corners of the internet, in therapy groups, in school assemblies, in living rooms where someone whispered, "Hey, listen to this guy. He gets it." And while Jack never sought fame again, something poetic happened. He became a symbol, not of success, but of survival, of starting over, of what happens when you build a life around purpose, not performance. One evening, during a quiet retreat in the mountains, Jack stood by the fire and looked up at the stars. A friend asked him, "Do you ever miss it? The money, the spotlight, the power?" Jack thought for a while, then said, simply, "I used to build towers. Now I plant gardens. One fed my ego. The other feeds souls. I'll take the garden." And that's the legacy of Jack Monroe, a man who lost millions, but gave the world something far more valuable: hope.